I counted 31 consecutive days without my husband touching me. Not a kiss, not his hand resting on my lower back when he passed behind me in the kitchen, not even the accidental brush of fingers that used to happen without either of us thinking about it. 31 days of learning how loud silence can be when it sleeps beside you. It started with what Ryan called a serious conversation we need to have. We were sitting on opposite ends of our sofa in our downtown apartment, the one we'd chosen together because it had too much light and not enough storage, just like us back then. He had that expression on his face, the one that told me this speech had been practiced, rehearsed, polished in his head long before I was invited into it. "I need to establish a boundary," he said, using that careful, therapeutic vocabulary he'd picked up somewhere recently. "I don't want you touching me unless I initiate it. I need space to feel like myself again." I remember staring at him, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to process the words. Room to feel like himself. We had been married for 5 years. Together for 7. When exactly did my touch turn into something he needed protection from? "All right," I said, because what alternative did I have? "If that's what you need." The relief on his face was immediate, visible, almost alarming, as if he genuinely expected resistance, like asking your wife to become a stranger in her own marriage was a reasonable boundary she might fight against. That marked day 1. By day 3, I was already failing. We were watching a series we'd followed together for years, and without thinking, I reached for his hand. Muscle memory, habit, love. He pulled away like I'd burned him. "Michelle," he said calmly, patiently, "remember what we talked about?" "Right, sorry." He turned back to the screen. I sat there staring at the empty space between us on the couch, wondering when it had turned into an uncrossable canyon. Day 5, I tried to hug him goodbye before my morning run. His body went rigid in my arms. "I thought we had an understanding," he said. "I just wanted to say goodbye. You can say goodbye with words." So I did. And somewhere between mile 3 and mile 8 along the waterfront trail, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't living with my husband anymore. I was living with someone who was slowly erasing me, one untouched day at a time. My name is Michelle Carter. I'm 34. I'm the kind of woman who schedules her life in quiet blocks, morning runs before the city fully wakes up, meetings stacked neatly, groceries bought with a list, laundry folded the same way every time. Not because I'm obsessive, because order used to make me feel safe. And for a long time, Ryan felt like order too. We met when I was 27 and still trying to prove I deserved the job I had. I worked in project operations for a mid-sized tech firm, lots of timelines, budgets, and people who panicked when a spreadsheet didn't match reality. Ryan was a consultant back then, the kind of man who walked into rooms like he belonged there, like he was doing everyone a favor by existing. We met at a friend's rooftop birthday party. It was late summer, humid air, cheap wine, music too loud to talk comfortably. I had escaped to the edge of the roof with my drink just to breathe, and Ryan was already there, leaning on the railing like he owned the skyline. He glanced at my cup and said, "You look like someone who hates small talk." I answered without thinking. "I love small talk. I just hate pretending to enjoy it." He laughed, not politely, but genuinely, like I'd surprised him. And then he asked me real questions. Not, "What do you do?" but "What do you like doing when no one expects anything from you?" I told him about running, how it quieted my thoughts, how it was the one place I didn't have to be impressive, just consistent. He told me about the first time he moved out of his parents' house and ate cereal for dinner 3 nights in a row because freedom tasted like sugar. By the end of that night, we weren't flirting like strangers. We were talking like 2 people who had accidentally stumbled into familiarity. Our first date was at a tiny restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the tables are too close and you can hear other people's secrets if you're not careful. He ordered for himself confidently, then looked at me and asked, "Are you the type who knows what you want, or the type who needs time to decide?" "I'm the type who knows," I said, and picked the same thing he did, just to see his reaction. He grinned. Dangerous. I should have remembered that word later. When we moved in together, it felt like leveling up, like our relationship had graduated into something solid. We decorated the apartment with compromise. His sleek furniture, my warm textures. His minimalist taste, my need for things that felt lived in. We planted basil on the windowsill. We bought matching mugs even though we never used the same mug twice. We built routines that looked like love from the outside. The engagement came on a rainy Thursday night. He didn't do anything grand. No restaurant, no crowd, just our living room, a small velvet box, and a ring that caught the lamplight when he opened it. "I don't want a life that doesn't include you," he said. I cried so hard I laughed at myself for crying. We married a year later, nothing extravagant, but full of the people who mattered. His parents hugged me like I was already family, and I remember thinking, this is what safety looks like. For the first few years, our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. We argued over stupid things, dishwashers, weekend plans, whether the thermostat was trying to kill us, but we always came back to each other. Then somewhere along the way, the arguments changed. They weren't about dishes anymore. They were about tone, about space, about pressure, about how I was too much without ever saying exactly what too much meant. Ryan started speaking like a man who'd learned new phrases that sounded emotionally intelligent but felt hollow. I need to protect my energy. I'm working on myself. I don't feel seen. And when I tried to ask what he needed from me, concretely, he would sigh like I'd missed the point on purpose. His family noticed too. His mother started calling me more often, asking gentle questions that didn't sound like questions. "How's Ryan? Work stress still high? You're taking care of yourself too, right?" And I would answer like a loyal wife does, softly, carefully, always smoothing the edges so no one would see the cracks. Because I didn't want to admit that the man who once reached for my hand without thinking had started treating my touch like a problem. And the terrifying thing is, it didn't start with that boundary talk. It started with little signs I told myself were nothing. The way he started turning his phone face down. The way his smiles appeared faster for a screen than for me. The way his body seemed to recoil before I even touched him, like he was already bracing. I ignored it, because ignoring felt easier than asking a question I might not survive hearing the answer to. But when he finally said, "No touching unless I initiate," something inside me understood before my mind could catch up. This wasn't about space. It was about distance. And distance, I was learning, is how people leave you while still living in your house. After that conversation, the apartment felt different. Not louder, not emptier, just misaligned. Like the furniture had been moved half an inch in every direction and my body couldn't stop noticing. I became hyper-aware of myself in ways I hadn't been since adolescence. Where my hands were, how close I stood, whether my movements might be interpreted as a violation instead of affection. Loving my husband had turned into a constant internal audit. By day 7, I noticed the phone. It was always in his hand now, not just checked, but inhabited. He scrolled with intent, typed with focus, smiled at the screen in small, private ways that felt personal, intimate, and most importantly, not meant for me. We would sit on opposite ends of the couch, the same show playing in the background, and he was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere I couldn't reach without breaking a rule he'd set. Somewhere that made his face soften in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. I tried not to stare, tried not to imagine stories that made my chest tighten, but my mind filled the silence anyway. By day 12, the rejections had become physical reflexes. I brushed past him in the kitchen, an accident, and he flinched. Actually flinched. Like my presence startled him. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, the words tasting wrong in my mouth. He nodded, already turning back to his phone. That night, I lay awake, listening to his breathing beside me. Steady, unbothered. I wondered how someone could sleep so peacefully next to a woman who was quietly disappearing. By day 15, I noticed he'd started moving his chair away from mine at dinner. Not dramatically. Just a few inches. Enough to notice. Enough to sting. "You don't have to do that," I said once, trying to keep my voice light. "I'm just more comfortable this way," he replied without looking up. "Comfortable away from me." The words echoed longer than they should have. His family started appearing more in our lives around then. Casual check-ins, group texts, invitations that felt less like invitations and more like supervision. His sister asked me once, during a Sunday lunch, "Have you been giving Ryan enough space lately? He's been under a lot of pressure." Enough space. Like love was something you rationed. By day 19, I stopped reaching out instinctively. I still wanted to. My body hadn't caught up to the new rules yet, but I'd learned the cost of forgetting. During a movie night, I leaned slightly toward him, habit again, and he stood up abruptly. "Bathroom," he said. I watched him walk away, heart pounding, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not even sadness. Resignation. By day 21, I stopped trying. Not consciously, not as a protest, I just ran out of energy. It takes effort to love someone who treats your affection like a hazard. It takes concentration to move through your own home like you're navigating a minefield. I didn't announce my withdrawal. I didn't decide anything. I just let go. By day 28, I marked it in my phone calendar without knowing why. 1 full month. 30 days of sleeping next to someone who hadn't reached for me once. Not in sleep, not by accident, not even out of habit. And he still hadn't initiated anything. Not a kiss, not a hug, not even a hand on my shoulder as he passed by. That's when the realization hit me with unsettling clarity. The rule was never about personal space. It was about creating distance from me. Specifically, exclusively. By day 31, I woke up with the thought already formed in my mind. It's been a month. I found him in the kitchen, making coffee, phone in hand. He smiled at the screen, a small, pleased smile that didn't belong to the room we were standing in. Something in my chest hardened into certainty. It's been a month, I said. He looked up, confused. A month of what? A month since you set your rule. You haven't initiated contact once. He waved it off like I was being dramatic. I've been busy. Don't manufacture problems where there aren't any. And there it was, the final seed settling into place. I wasn't manufacturing anything. I was living inside it. You're right, I said quietly, setting my mug down with care. This isn't drama. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't confusion or longing. I felt resolve. I didn't slam the door when I left that morning. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't say anything sharp or dramatic. I picked up my running shoes, slipped them on with deliberate calm, and walked out like a woman proving something, not to him, but to herself. I ran for nearly 3 hours, along the bay, through side streets, past the park where couples walked dogs, and held hands without thinking twice. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I kept moving because every step felt like a decision my body had already made before my mind could catch up. When I finally came back, sweat-soaked and shaking, he was in the same spot. Same counter, same phone, same absorbed posture. He didn't ask where I'd been, didn't look worried, didn't even look curious. That was the moment it clicked all the way into place. This distance wasn't accidental. It was comfortable for him. That afternoon, my friend Lena called. We used to meet for weekend yoga or coffee, things I'd quietly stopped doing without ever explaining why. Where have you been? She asked. You vanished. Just dealing with stuff at home. A pause, then carefully, everything okay with you and Ryan? I stared at the sidewalk outside my office window, the city moving like nothing in my life had just fractured. I don't know if there is a me and Ryan anymore. She didn't rush to fill the silence. When she spoke, her voice was steady. Do you want to talk? We met that evening at a small wine bar near the park, the kind of place with dim lights and no pressure to perform happiness. I told her everything, the rule, the 31 days, the phone, the growing sense of being erased. She listened without interrupting. No advice, no minimizing, just presence. When I finished, she leaned back and said quietly, Michelle, you're not crazy. Something inside me cracked open at that. You're responding to being rejected over and over again, she continued. That's not insecurity, that's reality. I nodded, swallowing hard. So what are you going to do? She asked. I'm done trying, I said. Done being the only one who wants this marriage. That's fair, she said immediately. Completely fair. It felt good, dangerously good, to hear someone say that without qualifiers. That night, I started living differently. Not loudly, not vindictively, just accurately. I stopped acting like we were in a relationship and started acting like what we actually were, 2 people sharing a lease and a history. Day 32. He came home from work and found me reading in the armchair, not the couch where we used to sit together. Hey, he said hesitantly, how was your day? Fine. He waited, clearly expecting me to ask about his day, to keep the script alive. I turned the page of my book. That's it? He asked. Yep. I could feel his eyes on me, trying to decode what had changed. I didn't look up. I'd spent 31 days respecting his boundaries. Now he could spend some time wondering where mine were. Tuesday I cooked dinner for myself. 1 portion, carefully plated, exactly what I wanted. I sat at the table and ate in silence. He walked in, stopped short. You're not making dinner for both of us? I figured you'd want to handle your own needs, I said calmly. Autonomy and all that. That's not what I meant when I said... I know, I interrupted gently, but this is what it means now. He stared at me, then grabbed crackers from the pantry and retreated to the bedroom. I cleaned only my dishes. Wednesday, he suggested we watch our show together. I stayed in the armchair, phone in hand. You're all the way over there, he said, irritation creeping into his voice. I'm respecting your space. I didn't mean you had to sit across the room. I finally looked at him, really looked. What did you mean, Ryan? Because I'm honestly not sure anymore. He didn't answer. By the end of the week, something had shifted. He was the one lingering in doorways now. the one trying to start conversations, the one unsettled by the distance he'd created. And I was calm, unshakably calm. That calm lasted until week 7, when I came home early one afternoon, earlier than he expected. The bedroom door was slightly open, and I heard his voice, soft, intimate, warm in a way it hadn't been with me in months. "I miss you too," he said. "I know it's complicated right now. Thursday works, same place as last time. He won't notice. He's been distant anyway." He laughed, a real laugh. I stood frozen in the hallway, every nerve awake. Then I walked away quietly, poured myself a drink, and sat down to think. I wasn't angry. I was relieved. The rule wasn't about space. It was about making room for someone else. I expected rage to hit first. The kind that makes your hands shake, your chest burn, your mouth say things you can't take back. That's what betrayal is supposed to feel like, right? Instead, what settled over me was something quieter. Clarity. I stood in the kitchen holding a glass of water I hadn't realized I'd poured, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside our window. My reflection in the darkened glass looked composed. Too composed for a woman who had just heard her husband speak to someone else with the softness he no longer reserved for me. I replayed his words in my head, not obsessively, methodically. "Thursday works, same place as last time. He won't notice anything." The casual certainty of it was what hurt the most. Not guilt, not hesitation. Confidence. That night, I didn't confront him. I didn't cry in front of him. Didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. When he came out of the bedroom later, phone in hand, acting normal, almost relaxed, I mirrored him perfectly. "How was your day?" he asked. "Fine," I said. The same word I'd given him all week. It tasted different now, sharper, final. 2 days later, his laptop sat open on the kitchen counter while he showered. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't even trying to look. But the screen was angled just enough that the notification preview was unavoidable. Ruby Collins. The name hit like a memory unlocking itself. Ryan had mentioned her months ago, casually, over dinner. An ex-girlfriend from college, recently divorced, recently back in town. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again." I didn't touch the laptop, didn't scroll, didn't read further. I didn't need to. I filed it away alongside the phone call, the late nights, the new tone in his voice, evidence accumulating without effort. That weekend, he announced he was going to book club. He was dressed nicer than usual, different cologne, new shirt, a version of himself I hadn't seen in a long time. "Have fun," I said, not looking up from my phone. "I might be late," he added, watching my face closely. "Okay." He lingered by the door, clearly waiting for something, for me to ask which book, which people, what time he'd be back. I gave him nothing. After the door closed, I opened his laptop. I knew the password. He'd never changed it. Still our anniversary date. The book club group chat was easy to find. Their last meeting had been 2 weeks ago. The next one was scheduled for Thursday. Not tonight. So book club was code. When he came home near 11, I pretended to be asleep. As he slid into bed, the smell hit me immediately. Someone else's cologne, mixed with his skin, mixed with lies. I lay perfectly still, breathing slow and even, letting him believe he was getting away with it. The next morning, he told me book club had gone late and they'd gone for drinks afterward. "Sounds fun," I said neutrally. "What book are you all reading?" He froze, just for a fraction of a second. "The mystery one." "Which one?" "You know, the one we picked last time." I nodded like I believed him, like I wasn't watching him scramble. By the end of that week, the pattern was undeniable. The no-touching rule started right when Ruby came back into his life. The phone, the lies, the sudden need for space. He didn't want distance from everyone. He wanted distance from me, so he could give intimacy to someone else without technically breaking the rules he'd invented. That night, while he was in the shower, I researched divorce attorneys. Not angrily, not dramatically. Practically. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, heart steady, reading reviews, taking notes. This marriage had ended the day he told me my touch wasn't welcome. I was just finally catching up. Monday morning of week 8, he cornered me in the kitchen. "We need to talk about what's been going on with you," he said, arms crossed. "With me?" I asked calmly. "You've been cold, distant, acting like we're strangers." The irony was almost impressive. "When was the last time we touched?" I asked. "That's different." "Is it?" I met his eyes, held them. "How's Ruby doing these days?" Panic flashed across his face before he masked it. "I don't talk to her." "Right," I said softly. "My mistake." That evening he tried something new. He sat close to me on the couch, touched my arm deliberately, acted like the last 6 weeks had never happened. I moved away immediately. "I'm trying to be close to you," he said, hurt in his voice. "Now you are," I replied. "How convenient." He cried. "A month ago that would have broken me. Now I just felt tired. Something inside me had shifted permanently, and I knew there was no going back. By the time he started trying again, I was already gone. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, the version of me that waited for his affection had packed her bags quietly and left without saying goodbye. Wednesday, he announced book club again. I looked up from my book, already knowing the script. "Which book are you discussing tonight?" He hesitated too long. "The one we picked last time." "Book club met 2 weeks ago," I said evenly. "The next meeting is Thursday." The color drained from his face. "How dare you check up on me like that?" he snapped. "I didn't check up on you," I replied calmly. "I checked up on your story. They don't match." He stormed out anyway. When he came home near midnight, he reeked of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I was sitting in the living room, fully awake. "You waited up?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "I stayed up. There's a difference." He leaned in and tried to kiss me. I turned my head away. "You won't even kiss me now?" he said, wounded. "Whose cologne is that?" His hand flew to his shirt instinctively. A friend hugged me. "Stop," I said quietly. "Just stop lying." The next morning, the receipt fell out of his jacket pocket when I grabbed his phone like he asked. Dinner for 2, an expensive restaurant downtown, wine, dessert to share, total $142.80. The supposed book club night. I took a photo of the receipt and slid it back exactly where it had been. He had no idea how much I knew. And I wasn't collecting evidence for revenge. I was collecting clarity. Friday night, he staged what I can only describe as a performance. Candles throughout the apartment. Music playing softly. He was wearing lingerie I'd never seen before. Something carefully chosen. Something meant to impress. "I miss us," he said, stepping toward me. "I miss you." "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you miss having me as an option?" "I'm here now," he insisted. "I'm trying." He reached for me. I stepped back. "No." "Why won't you touch me?" His voice broke. "Because those were your rules," I said calmly. "No touching unless you initiate." "Oh, but you are initiating now," I continued. "Funny how your desire returned the moment you realized I stopped chasing you." I walked past the candles and went to bed. The next day he tried anger. "Fine," he shouted. "You want the truth? Rubby and I have been talking. We met for coffee a few times. That's it. Coffee at midnight? It's not what you think." "It doesn't matter what I think," I said steadily. "You wanted me at arm's length while you decided if your ex was a better option than your wife." Sunday brought desperation. "I was testing you," he shouted, pacing the kitchen. "I wanted to see if you'd fight for us." I stared at him, stunned by the audacity. "You made a rule I couldn't touch you," I said slowly. "You avoided me for weeks. You lied, and I was supposed to beg harder?" "Relationships take effort from both people." "I agree," I said. "You stopped making any effort 2 months ago." That was when I walked out. Monday, I told him I wanted to separate. He begged for counseling, promised change. "I don't want to work on this anymore," I said. "I want to work on myself." Tuesday, I toured studio apartments. The third one was perfect. Small, bright, empty. "I'll take it," I told the landlord without hesitation. That evening, he asked where I'd been. "Handling business." The moment he saw listings on my laptop, he understood. "You're really leaving me?" "I really am." The voicemail started. Apologies. Anger. Bargaining. I stopped listening. Saturday, I packed. 7 boxes, 2 suitcases. My books, my running shoes, my grandmother's blanket. I left the wedding album behind. At the door, he whispered, "Please don't do this." "You did this 31 days ago," I said, setting my ring on the counter. "I'm just finishing it." I didn't look back. The studio apartment was empty in a way that felt almost sacred. No furniture, no shared history clinging to the walls, just white space and quiet and the faint echo of my own footsteps as I carried the last box inside. That first night, I slept on an air mattress with a single pillow and the blanket my grandmother had made years before she died. The city hummed outside the window, cars passing, someone laughing on the street below. Life continuing without any regard for the fact that my marriage had just ended. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for the collapse. The sobbing, the panic, the moment when regret would come rushing in and tell me I'd made a mistake. It didn't come. What came instead was exhaustion so deep it felt cellular, the kind of tiredness that lives in your bones after you've held yourself together for too long. I fell asleep quickly. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up at 3 a.m., wondering where my husband's hands had gone. The dark moment didn't arrive with drama. It arrived quietly the next morning. I woke up early out of habit, reached instinctively toward the other side of the bed, and touched nothing but cold air. The absence landed harder than any argument ever had. There was no one to negotiate with, no one to disappoint, no one to explain myself to. Just me. I sat on the floor with a cup of coffee I'd made in a borrowed mug, my back against the wall, the sun creeping slowly across the hardwood. And for the first time since I'd left, the weight hit me all at once. I wasn't angry anymore. I was grieving. Not just the marriage, but the version of myself who believed love meant patience at any cost. The woman who thought endurance was the same thing as devotion. The woman who counted days without touch and still wondered if she was asking for too much. I cried then, quietly, fully, no audience, no performance. I cried for the nights I lay beside someone who treated my affection like a threat. For the mornings I apologized for wanting closeness. For the moment I realized he'd been smiling at someone else while I was still trying to fix us. Grief has a way of stripping things down to their core, and at the core of it all was one brutal truth. I had abandoned myself long before I left him. That realization hurt more than anything he'd done. The following days were heavy, practical, necessary. I went to work, smiled when required, answered emails, functioned. But every evening, when I came back to the empty apartment, the silence pressed in on me. There were moments, small, dangerous ones, when my phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification from an unknown number and my chest tightened. What if he finally understood? What if he said the right thing now? What if I was walking away too soon? I listened to one message while walking through the park, the city spread out in front of me like a future I hadn't quite accepted yet. He was crying, apologizing, calling it a test, saying nothing really happened, saying he chose me. I stopped walking, let the words wash over me, and suddenly I saw it clearly. Even now, especially now, he was still asking me to rescue him from the consequences of his own choices. He wasn't reaching out because he'd learned to love me better. He was reaching out because he'd lost control. That realization hurt, but it also grounded me. That night, alone in my apartment, I sat on the floor surrounded by unopened boxes and understood something fundamental. This was the lowest point. Not because I was alone, but because I could finally see how small I'd allowed my life to become. There was no villain standing in front of me anymore, no one to blame, just the quiet responsibility of deciding who I was going to be now that no one was asking me to shrink. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street below. People moved with purpose. Couples argued and laughed. Someone jogged past with headphones in, completely absorbed in their own world. Life was happening, and I was still here. That night, I slept deeply again. Not because everything was okay, but because, for the first time, I wasn't betraying myself. And that, painful as it was, felt like the beginning of something honest. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no cinematic moment where I woke up transformed, confident, unshaken. Healing wasn't dramatic. It was incremental. Quiet decisions stacking on top of each other until they formed something solid beneath my feet. 3 days after I moved out, I stopped listening to the voicemails. Not out of anger, out of recognition. Each message followed the same rhythm: apology, justification, self-pity, hope. He said he understood now, said he'd changed, said he'd never meant to hurt me, said he was scared, said he was testing me, said he chose me. What he never said, not once, was why my pain had been acceptable to him at the time. That absence mattered. One afternoon, while sorting through paperwork on the floor, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was Marianne, his older sister. "I won't take much of your time," she said, her voice careful. "I just wanted to talk to you woman to woman." We met for coffee the next day. She looked uncomfortable, like someone who had rehearsed this conversation but wasn't sure how to begin. "I didn't know," she said finally. "Not everything, but enough." I waited. "He told us you needed space," she continued, "that you were distant, that he was trying to respect your boundaries." I let out a slow breath. "He didn't tell you he asked me not to touch him for a month," I said quietly. "He didn't tell you he was meeting his ex while still married to me." Her face tightened. I figured. That surprised me. "I've seen him do this before," she admitted. "Create distance. Rewrite the story so he doesn't have to sit with guilt." The words landed gently, but firmly. "He called it a test," I said. She nodded. "He always does." That was the moment. Not because she confirmed anything new, but because someone who loved him saw the truth clearly and still didn't excuse it. "You didn't fail," she added softly. "You passed as the only test that actually matters. You chose yourself." Something in my chest loosened. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment and thought about the rule, the one that started everything. No touching unless I initiate. It wasn't about autonomy. It wasn't about healing. It was about control. He wanted to see how much I would tolerate, how far I would bend, how long I would keep offering love without receiving it. And I had, until I didn't. That realization wasn't empowering in the way movies portray it. It was sobering, grounded, clean. I wasn't leaving because I was strong. I was leaving because staying had made me weaker. The next morning, I went for a run through a neighborhood I didn't know yet. Different streets, different rhythms. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but my mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in months. With every step, a sentence repeated itself quietly in my head. I don't have to earn love by disappearing. When I got back, sweaty and breathing hard, I stood in the shower and let the water run over me, watching it carry the last few weeks down the drain. That afternoon, I made a decision. I called the attorney back and scheduled the next steps. I opened a new bank account in my own name. I ordered furniture, nothing extravagant, just pieces that felt like me. Each action was small. Each one was final. The turning point wasn't about anger or revenge or proving anything to him. It was about reclaiming authorship over my own life. That night, another voicemail came through, a long one. His voice was calmer this time, sadder, reflective. I listened to the first 30 seconds. Then I deleted it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer changed anything. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I was building something better in its place. And for the first time since that conversation on the couch, I felt steady. Not hopeful, not euphoric, just grounded, which I was learning was far more powerful. Consequences rarely arrive the way people imagine them. They don't explode all at once. They don't announce themselves with dramatic music or public confessions. Most of the time, they unfold quietly. Doors closing one by one, opportunities dissolving, people withdrawing their trust without ever explaining why. That was what happened to Ryan. I didn't orchestrate it. I didn't expose him. I didn't confront his family or his friends with screenshots and receipts. I didn't need to. The truth has a way of surfacing when you stop protecting someone from it. The first crack appeared at his workplace. One evening, Lena called me. Not gossiping, just checking in. I ran into someone who works with Ryan, she said carefully. They mentioned he's been distracted, missing deadlines, canceling meetings. I wasn't surprised. For months, he'd had 2 lives running in parallel. One stable, one secret. When the stable one walked away, the illusion collapsed. A week later, his mother reached out. Not to accuse, not to defend him, just confused. He won't tell us what really happened, she said on the phone, only that you left him suddenly. I closed my eyes. I didn't leave suddenly, I said gently. I left slowly. He just didn't notice until I was gone. There was silence on the line. I wish he had treated you better, she finally said. That was all. No pressure to reconcile, no guilt, no request to fix him. Just acknowledgement. And that mattered more than she probably realized. The ex, the one he'd created space for, didn't last either. I learned that indirectly, weeks later, through a mutual acquaintance. Apparently, once the secrecy was gone, so was the excitement. The relationship that had thrived in the shadows didn't survive daylight. He'd built an escape fantasy, and then found himself alone inside it. His friends began choosing distance too. Not dramatically, just less availability, fewer invitations, shorter conversations. People have a way of pulling back when they realize they were unknowingly complicit in someone else's dishonesty. Meanwhile, my life grew quieter and stronger. The apartment filled in slowly. A couch I chose because it felt comfortable, not impressive. A bed that actually supported my back. Plates that matched because I wanted them to. I cooked meals I liked, ate when I was hungry, ran new routes through unfamiliar neighborhoods, built routines that belonged entirely to me. Peace stopped feeling fragile. It started feeling normal. Ryan kept trying to reach me. New numbers, emails, messages passed through friends. Each one followed the same arc: remorse, explanation, plea. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I no longer needed him to understand. Understanding wasn't the same as accountability. One afternoon, while sorting mail, I found separation paperwork from my attorney, finalized and ready for filing. I signed it calmly at the kitchen counter, sunlight pooling across the page. No shaking hands, no tears, just completion. The last time I saw Ryan was purely logistical. He needed to retrieve a few remaining items from the old apartment. I agreed to be present, not for him, but for myself, to close the door properly. He looked smaller somehow, less certain, The confidence that once filled rooms now felt brittle. "You look different," he said quietly. "So do you." He hovered near the doorway, eyes flicking around the space like he was searching for remnants of a life he could step back into. "I never meant to lose you," he said. "I know," I replied, and I did know. But intention doesn't undo impact. He swallowed. "I didn't think you'd actually leave." That was the truth, finally spoken out loud. "That's the part you should sit with," I said calmly. "Not that I left, but that you believed I wouldn't." There was nothing else to say. When he left, I locked the door behind him and stood there for a moment. Not relieved, not sad. Complete. The fallout didn't end him. It taught him something, and it freed me. I didn't walk away with victory. I walked away with dignity. And sometimes that's the most powerful ending there is. 3 months passed the way seasons do, quietly, without asking permission. My life settled into something steady, not exciting in the way people post about, not dramatic, just honest. I woke up early, ran new routes through streets that no longer reminded me of anything I'd lost. I drank coffee by the window and let silence exist without trying to fix it. I worked. I came home. I cooked meals that tasted like choice instead of compromise. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. The legal separation finalized without ceremony. Papers filed, dates stamped, a chapter closed with professional efficiency. I didn't feel hollow when it happened. I felt aligned, like reality had finally caught up to a decision my body had made long ago. At a work event in December, a colleague I barely knew approached me near the refreshments table. "I hope this doesn't sound strange," he said, "but you seem lighter lately." I thought about that. "I think I am," I replied. He smiled. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." It suited me. This version of myself who didn't apologize for wanting closeness, who didn't negotiate her needs down to something easier to ignore, who understood that love isn't proven through endurance or suffering or tests designed to break you. Ryan tried to reach me a few more times. The messages eventually changed in tone, less desperate, more reflective. In the last one I listened to, his voice sounded calm, sad, honest in a way it hadn't been before. He said he finally understood. I believed him, and I still didn't respond. Forgiveness doesn't always require access. One cold morning in late January, I was sitting alone in a small coffee shop with a book when a man at the next table leaned over. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, smiling. "Is that the new Murakami?" "It is," I said. "Have you read it yet?" We talked easily, about books, the neighborhood, whether the pastries were worth the price. There was no tension, no performance, no wondering what the right move was. When he laughed and briefly touched my arm, it felt natural, not like a test, not like a trap. His name was Liam. We exchanged numbers, made loose plans to meet again. Nothing heavy, nothing promised. And that was the point. I wasn't afraid of connection anymore, because I'd learned something essential from those 31 untouched days. The right person will never make you earn affection through silence, distance, or games. Love doesn't withhold itself to see how much pain you'll tolerate. It shows up, or it doesn't. Walking away from someone who deliberately withholds love isn't quitting. It's choosing yourself. I finished my coffee, pulled on my coat, and stepped outside into the cold morning air. The sun broke through the clouds, catching on wet pavement, turning the street into something bright and new. Behind me was a woman who counted days and accepted crumbs. Ahead of me was simply forward. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough.